All right, so this next part of The Boy Who Invented TV. Trying for a better life, the Farnsworths moved from Utah to an Idaho farm with fields of beets and potatoes. 11-year-old Philo drove one of their covered wagons, carrying a crate of piglets, a cage of hens, his violin, and their new prized possession, a phonograph. Arriving in the Snake River Valley, he noticed something up in the air power lines. Their new home was wired for electricity. A generator ran the lights and water heater, the hay stacker and grain elevator, and other farm equipment. And up in the attic was another welcome surprise, a shelf of old popular science magazines with thrilling articles about magnetism, electricity, and those new magic boxes, radios. Philo promptly claimed this as his bedroom. His chores began before dawn, but he trained himself to wake an hour early so that he could switch on the light and read in bed. Any spare money he had went to buy more magazines. That's when he saw the word television for the first time. It meant a machine that was something like a radio, only it sent pictures instead of sounds. Didn't actually exist yet, but scientists were racing to invent one. The electric generator broke down a lot, and repairs were costly. Each time a repairman came, Philo bombarded him with questions. Okay, so what important event happened to Philo when he turned 11? You should have said something like his family moved from Utah to an Idaho farm with electricity. So, electricity is going to lead him to everything he's going to need for a television eventually. Can't have television without TV. How did Philo's life change after the Farnsworths moved to Idaho? So we're looking at this here. He had electricity in Idaho at the new farm and access to science magazines. That's where he saw the word television for the first time. After yet another breakdown, Philo set out to fix the machine himself. He took it apart, cleaned it, put it back together, and pressed the on button. It worked. Philo's father was enormously proud of him. From then on, he was the Farnsworth's electrical engineer. Philo tinkered with broken motors, reels of wire, old tools. He devised gadgets to hook up to the generator, anything to make his chores easier, like installing lights in the barn. His least favorite thing was washing clothes. Hours of standing while pushing and pulling the lever that swished the water around the wash tub. They didn't have washing machines back then. So he attached a motor with pulleys to the lever to make it churn on its own, leaving him extra time to read. When he was 13, Philo entered a contest sponsored by Science and Invention magazine. Using what he'd learned about magnets, he pictured an ignition lock that would make the new Model T Fords harder to steal. When he won the contest, Philo spent the prize money on his first pair of proper long pants. Wearing boyish short pants at the Friday dances was just plain embarrassing. Philo went on investigating television. An article called Pictures That Fly Through Air stimulated him. Scientists were having no luck. So far, their ideas resulted in crude mechanical devices that used whirling discs and motors. Philo doubted any disc could whirl fast enough to work. Much better to do the job electronically. To harness electrons, those mysterious invisible particles that traveled at the speed of light. What can you infer about Philo based on the fact that he used his prize money to buy clothes? I say something like, even though Philo was different from many other kids, he was still a regular teenage boy who wanted to fit in with other kids his age. So that's why he's using his prize money to buy clothes. He wants clothes that are going to make him fit in. What events on this page show Philo's progress toward inventing TV? Well, you should have said something like, he learned how to fix the generator and he invented machines that made his chores easier, which gave him more time to read and investigate television, something like that. So we start with, as a child, Philo became interested in machines. At age 11, they moved to a farm that had electricity. He heard the word television for the same time. And then he invented machines that made his chores easier. So he's starting to invent stuff. He's getting closer and closer to being the guy who invents the TV. One bright sunny day, 14-year-old Philo plowed the potato fields. It was the best chore for thinking, out in the open country by himself, back and forth, back and forth. The plow created rows of overturned earth. He looked behind him at the lines he was carving, perfectly parallel. Then he almost fell off the plow seat. All his thoughts fused together. Instead of seeing rows of dirt, he saw a way to create television, breaking down images into parallel lines of light, capturing them and transmitting them as electrons, then reassembling them for a viewer. If it was done quickly enough, people's eyes could be tricked into seeing a complete picture instead of lines. Capturing light in a bottle was how he thought of it, using electricity, not a machine with moving parts inside. Philo's grin was wide. He told the idea to his father, who tried to understand but couldn't keep up with his son. What important thing happened on the page that I just read that brought Philo closer to inventing TV? You should have said something like, while plowing the potato fields, the parallel rows of dirt gave him the idea of using parallel lines of light to create a television. So he's got an idea about how to make television while plowing the fields. So something I can do to help understand this better, I can ask myself a question and then find the answer. So I can ask myself how Philo's idea was different from the idea of other scientists. So there's scientists working on this, and he's just a 14-year-old boy. How is his idea going to be the idea that's going to invent television? So to answer how his idea is different from other scientists, I can think about what I saw in the text. He wanted to use electricity instead of a machine with moving parts. He would break down an image, transmit it as electrons, and reassemble it for viewers. So that's what it says in there. In the autumn, Philo started high school, riding horseback 4 miles each way. Back in my day, I rode a horse 4 miles both ways to school. That's what that reminds me of. Mr. Tolman, the senior chemistry teacher, noticed that his freshmen devoured books the way other students ate popcorn. He started tutoring Philo, coming in early and leaving late. One day, Mr. Tolman passed by a study hall and heard loud talking. Philo's latest hero was Albert Einstein, with his controversial new theory of relativity. Now Philo stood in the front of the room, enthusiastically explaining to his classmates step by step. Usually, Philo spoke little, with a halting voice, but when he could share his knowledge of science, he was a different boy. Philo had been aching to discuss the idea he'd gotten in the potato field with someone who might understand. One day, he finally told Mr. Tolman. All over the blackboard, he drew diagrams of his television. The teacher was boggled. Philo ripped a page out of the notebook he always kept in his shirt pocket. He scribbled a diagram of an all-electric camera, the kind of converter he envisioned. An image dissector, he called it. Mr. Tolman pointed out that it would take a lot of money to build such a thing. The only way he could think of helping was to encourage Philo to go on to college, but Philo was forced to quit college at 18 after his father died. By then, the family had moved back to Utah to the town of Provo, and Philo supported them by working at all sorts of jobs in nearby Salt Lake City. What details can you use to infer how Philo's love of science made him a different boy? You should have said something like, I can infer that he became more confident based on the fact that he spoke more loudly and with more enthusiasm, right? It says here, enthusiastically, he's saying, right? So he's a little bit different. He's super excited about science. Why did Mr. Tolman want Philo to go to college? You should have said something like, Mr. Tolman knew it would take a lot of money to build the image dissector, and he thought college might give Philo a better opportunity. He thought he could get a better paying job if he goes to college. And I'm going to pause there for today.